The Elephant Whisperer. My Life with the Herd in the African Wild, by Lawrence Anthony with Graham Spence. Narrated by Simon Vance. Copyright 2009 by Lawrence Anthony and Graham Spence. This unabridged audiobook is published by arrangement with St. Martin's Press and was produced in the year 2012 by Tantor Media Incorporated, which holds the copyright thereto. Prologue. In 1999, I was asked to accept a herd of troubled wild elephants on my game reserve. I had no inkling of the escapades and adventures I was about to embark upon. I had no idea how challenging it would be, or how much my life would be enriched. The adventure has been both physical and spiritual. Physical in the sense that it was action from the word go, as you'll see in the following pages. Spiritual because these giants of the planet took me deep into their world. Make no mistake, the title of this book is not about me, for I make no claim to any special abilities. It is about the elephants. It is they who whispered to me and taught me how to listen. How this happened was purely at a personal level. I am no scientist. I am a conservationist. So when I describe how the elephants reacted to me, or I to them, it is purely the truth of my own experiences. There are no laboratory tests here, but through trial and error I found out what worked best for me and my herd in our odyssey together. Not only am I a conservationist, I am an extremely lucky one, for I own a game reserve called Thula Thula. It consists of 5,000 acres of pristine bush in the heart of Zululand, South Africa, where elephants once roamed freely. No longer. Many rural Zulus have never seen an elephant. My elephants were the first wild ones to be reintroduced into our area for more than a century. Thula Thula is a natural home to much of the indigenous wildlife of Zululand, including the majestic white rhino, Cape buffalo, leopard, hyena, giraffe, zebra, wildebeest, crocodile, and many species of antelope, as well as lesser-known predators such as the lynx and serval. We have seen pythons as long as a truck, and we have possibly the biggest breeding population of white-backed vultures in the province. And, of course, we have elephants. The elephants came to us out of the blue, as you will hear. Today I cannot visualize a life without them. I don't want a life without them. To understand how they taught me so much, you have to understand that communication in the animal kingdom is as natural as a breeze, that in the beginning it was only self-imposed human limitations that impeded my understanding. In our noisy cities, we tend to forget the things our ancestors knew on a gut level, that the wilderness is alive, that its whispers are there for all to hear and to respond to. We also have to understand that there are things we cannot understand. Elephants possess qualities and abilities well beyond the means of science to decipher. Elephants cannot repair a computer, but they do have communication, physical and metaphysical, that would make Bill Gates's mouth drop open. In some very important ways, they are ahead of us. Some unexplained occurrences are quite evident throughout the plant and animal kingdom, and there is nothing like looking at what is actually going on around you to turn a lot of what you always thought to be true on its head. For instance, any game ranger will tell you that if you decide to dart rhino for relocation to other reserves, the day you go out to do so there will not be a rhino around for love or money. Yet the day before you saw them all over the place. Somehow they knew you were after them, and they simply vanished. The next week, when you only want to dart buffalo, the rhino you couldn't find will be standing by watching you. Many years ago I watched a hunter stalking his prey. He had a permit to target only an impala ram from a bachelor herd. Yet the only males he encountered that day were those with breeding herds of females. And even more incredibly, these non-shootable studs stood nonchalantly within range, eyeing him without a care in the world, while in the background bachelor herds were running for their lives. How is this so? None of us know. The more prosaic rangers among us just say it's Murphy's Law, that whatever can go wrong, will. When you want to shoot or dart an animal, they're never around. Others, like me, are not so sure. Maybe it's a bit more mystical. Maybe the message is in the wind. This less conventional view is supported by a wise old Zulu tracker I know well, a vastly experienced man of the bush. He told me that whenever monkeys near his village got too brazen at stealing food or threatening or biting children, they would decide to shoot one to scare the troop off. "But these monkeys are so clever," he said, tapping his temple. "The moment we decide to fetch the gun, they disappear. We have learned not even to say the name monkey or gun out loud among ourselves, because then they will not come out of the forest. When there is danger, they can hear without ears." Indeed. But amazingly, this transcends even to plant life. Our guest lodge on Thula Thula is about 2 miles from our home in a grove of indigenous acacias and hardwoods that have been there for centuries. Here in this ancient woodland, the acacia tree not only understands it's under attack when browsed by antelope or giraffe, it quickly injects tannin into its leaves, making them taste bitter. The tree then releases a scent, a pheromone, into the air to warn other acacias in the area of the potential danger. These neighbouring trees receive the warning and immediately start producing tannin themselves in anticipation of an attack. Now, a tree has no brain or central nervous system, so what is making these complex decisions? Or, more pertinently, why? Why would a seemingly insentient tree care enough about its neighbour's safety to go to all that trouble to protect it? Without a brain, how does it even know it has family or neighbours to protect? Under the microscope, living organisms are just a soup of chemicals and minerals. But what about what the microscope doesn't see? That life force, the vital ingredient of existence, from an acacia to an elephant, can it be quantified? My herd showed me that it can, that understanding and generosity of spirit is alive and well in the pachyderm kingdom, that elephants are emotional, caring, and extremely intelligent, and that they value good relations with humans. This is their story. They taught me that all life forms are important to each other in our common quest for happiness and survival, that there is more to life than just yourself, your own family, or your own kind. Chapter 1. In the distance, the percussive shot of a rifle sounded like a giant stick of firewood cracking. I jumped out of my chair, listening. It was a sound wired into a game ranger's psyche. Then came a burst. Crack, crack, crack. Flocks of squawking birds scrambled, silhouetted in the crimson sunset. Poachers, on the west boundary. David, my ranger, was already sprinting for the trusty old Land Rover. I grabbed a shotgun and followed, leaping into the driver's seat. Max, my brindle Staffordshire Bull Terrier, scrambled onto the seat between us. With all the excitement buzzing, he was not going to be left behind. As I twisted the ignition key and floored the accelerator, David grabbed the two-way radio. "Undonga!" he bellowed. "Undonga, are you receiving? Over?" Undonga was the head of my Ovambo guards, and a good man to have on your side in a gunfight, having served in the military. I would have felt better knowing him and his team were on their way, but only static greeted David's attempts to contact him. We powered on alone. Poachers had been the scourge of our lives since my fiancée Françoise and I bought Thula Thula, a magnificent game reserve in central Zululand. They had been targeting us for almost a year now. I couldn't work out who they were or where they were coming from. I had talked often with the Izinduna, headmen of the surrounding rural Zulu tribes, and they were adamant that their people were not involved. I believed them. Our employees were mainly local and exceptionally loyal. These thugs had to be from somewhere else. Twilight was darkening fast, and I slowed as we approached the western fence and killed the headlights. Pulling over behind a large anthill, David was first out as we eased through a cluster of acacia trees, nerves on edge, trigger fingers tense, watching and listening. Tightly choked pump-action scatterguns with heavy pellets were our weapons of choice against poachers, for in the dark, in the bush, things are about as close and personal as you can get. As any game ranger in Africa knows, professional poachers will shoot first and shoot to kill. The fence was just 50 yards away. Poachers like to keep their escape route open, and I made a circling motion with my arm to David. He nodded, knowing exactly what I meant. He would keep watch while I crawled to the fence to cut off the retreat if a firefight erupted. An acrid whiff of cordite spiced the evening air. It hung like a shroud in the silence. In Africa, the bush is never willingly mute. The cicadas never cease, except after gunshots. After a few minutes of absolute stillness, I knew we had been set up. I switched on my halogen torch, sweeping its beam up and down the fence. There were no gaps, revealing where a poacher could have cut his way in. David flicked on his torch as well, searching for tracks or blood spoor, indicating if an animal had been killed and dragged off. Nothing. Just an eerie silence. With no tracks inside the reserve, I realized that the shots must have been fired from just outside the fence. Damn, it's a decoy. As I said that, we heard more shots, muffled but distinctive crumps on the far side of the reserve, at least 45 minutes' drive on dirt tracks that are often little more than quagmires in the spring rains. We jumped back into the Land Rover and sped off, but I knew it was hopeless. We had been taken for suckers. We would never catch them. They would be off the reserve with a couple of slain nyala, one of Africa's most beautiful antelopes, before we got near. I cursed my foolhardiness. If I had only sent some rangers to the far side instead of charging off blindly, we could have caught them red-handed. But this proved one thing. I now knew for certain the Izindunas who had been claiming my problems were internal. Someone operating within the reserve was spot on. This was not the local community's work. It was not a few hungry tribesmen and scrawny dogs hunting for the pot. This was a well-organized criminal operation led by someone who followed our every move. How else could they have timed everything so perfectly? It was pitch dark when we arrived at the eastern perimeter of the reserve, and we traced the scene with our torches. The tracks told the story. 2 nyala had been taken with high-velocity hunting rifles. We could see the flattened, blood-stained grass from where their carcasses were dragged to a hole in the fence which had been crudely hacked with bolt cutters. About 10 yards outside the fence were the studded, muddy tracks of a 4x4 bush vehicle that by now would be several miles away. The animals would be sold to local butchers who would use them for biltong, a dried meat jerky that is much prized throughout Africa. The light of my torch picked up a bloody tuft of charcoal grey fur fluttering on the cut fence wire. At least one of the dead bucks was a male. The female nyala is light brown with thin white stripes on her back. I shivered, feeling old and weary. Thula Thula had been a hunting ranch before I had bought it, and I had vowed that would end. No animal would be needlessly killed again on my watch. I didn't realize how difficult that vow would be to keep. Despondently, we drove back to the lodge. Françoise greeted us with mugs of dark, rich coffee. Just what I needed. I glanced at her and smiled my thanks. Tall, graceful, and very French, she was just as beautiful as the day I had first met her catching a taxi on a freezing London morning 12 years ago. "What happened?" she asked. "A set-up. There were 2 groups. One fired some shots on the far boundary, then watched our Land Rover lights. As soon as we got there, the others bagged 2 buck on the eastern side." I took a gulp of coffee and sat down. "These guys are organized. Someone's going to get killed if we're not careful." Françoise nodded. 3 days ago the poachers had been so close it felt as if their bullets were whistling a fraction above our heads. "Better report it to the cops tomorrow," she said. I didn't reply. To expect the police to pay much attention to 2 murdered antelope was pushing it a little. Ndonga was furious the next morning when I told him that more animals had been shot. He admonished me for not calling him. I said we had tried, but failed to get a response. "Oh, sorry, Mr. Anthony. I went out for a few drinks last night. Not feeling too good today," he said, grinning sheepishly. I didn't feel like discussing his hangover. "Can you make this a priority?" I asked. He nodded. "We'll catch these bastards." I had barely got back to the house when the phone rang. A woman introduced herself, Marion Garay, from the Elephant Managers and Owners Association, EMOA, a private organization comprised of several elephant owners in South Africa that takes an interest in elephant welfare. I had heard of them and the good work they did for elephant conservation before, but as I was not an elephant owner, I had never dealt with them directly. Her warm voice instantly inspired empathy. She got straight to the point. She had heard about Thula Thula and the variety of magnificent indigenous Zululand wildlife that we had. She said she had also heard of how we were working closely with the local population in fostering conservation awareness, and wondered, would I be interested in adopting a herd of elephant? The good news, she continued before I could answer, was that I would get them for free, barring capture and transportation costs. You could have knocked me over with a blade of grass. Elephant? The world's largest mammal? And they wanted to give me a whole herd? For a moment I thought it was a hoax. I mean, how often do you get phoned out of the blue, asking if you want a herd of tuskers? But Marion was serious. "Okay," I asked. "What was the bad news?" "Well," said Marion, "there was a problem. The elephants were considered troublesome. They had a tendency to break out of reserves, and the owners wanted to get rid of them fast. If we didn't take them, they would be put down. Shot. All of them." "What do you mean by troublesome?" "The matriarch is an amazing escape artist, and has worked out how to break through electric fences. She just twists the wire around her tusks until it snaps, or takes the pain and smashes through. It's unbelievable. The owners have had enough, and now asked if Memoir can sort something out." I momentarily pictured a 5-ton beast deliberately enduring the agonizing shock of 8,000 volts stabbing through her body. That took determination. "Also, Lawrence, there are babies involved." "Why me?" Marion sensed my trepidation. This was an extremely unusual request. "I've heard you have a way with animals," she continued. "I reckon Thula Thula's right for them. You're right for them. Or maybe they're right for you." That floored me. If anything, we were exactly not right for a herd of elephant. I was only just getting the reserve operational and, as the previous day had spectacularly proved, having huge problems with highly organized poachers. I was about to say no when something held me back. I have always loved elephants. Not only are they the largest and noblest land creatures on this planet, but they symbolize all that is majestic about Africa. And here, unexpectedly, I was being offered my own herd and a chance to help. Would I ever get an opportunity like this again? "Where are they from?" "A reserve in Mpumalanga." Mpumalanga is the northeastern province of South Africa, where most of the country's game reserves, including the Kruger National Park, are situated. "How many?" 9. 3 adult females, 3 youngsters, of which 1 was male, an adolescent bull, and 2 babies. It's a beautiful family. The matriarch has a gorgeous baby daughter. The young bull, her son, is 15 years old and an absolutely superb specimen. They must be a big problem. Nobody just gives away elephants. As I said, the matriarch keeps breaking out. Not only does she snap electric wires, she's also learned how to unlatch gates with her tusks, and the owners aren't too keen about jumbos wandering into the guest camps. If you don't take them, they will be shot. Certainly the adults will be. I went quiet, trying to unravel all this in my head. The opportunity was great, but so was the risk. What about the poachers? Would the promise of ivory bring even more of them out of the woodwork? What about having to electrify my entire reserve to keep these giant pachyderms in, when I could barely keep thieves with high-velocity rifles out? What about having to build an enclosure to quarantine them while they got used to their new home? Where would I find the funds, the resources? Also, Marion didn't shy away from saying they were troublesome, but what did that really mean? Were they just escape artists? Or was this a genuine rogue herd, too dangerous and filled with hatred of humans to keep on a game reserve in a populated area? However, here was a herd in trouble. Despite the risks, I knew what I had to do. "Hell yes, I replied. "I'll take them." Chapter 2. I was still reeling from the shock of becoming an instant elephant owner when I got another. The current owners wanted the herd off their property within 2 weeks, or else the deal would be off. The elephants would be shot, as the owners regarded them as too much of a liability. Unfortunately, when an animal as large as an elephant is considered troublesome, it is almost always shot. 2 weeks? In that time we had to repair and electrify 20 miles of big game fencing, and build from scratch a quarantine boma, a traditional holding pen, strong enough to hold the planet's most powerful animal. When I bought Thula Thula in 1998, it was 5,000 acres of primal Africa, the only improvement being an old hunter's camp with outside ablutions. But its history is as exotic as the continent itself. Thula Thula is the oldest private game reserve in the province of KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa, and thought to be once part of the exclusive hunting grounds of King Shaka, the near-deified warrior who founded the Zulu nation in the early 19th century. In fact, it was so exclusive that anyone caught hunting there without the king's express permission was put to death. From Shaka onwards, for most of its existence, Thula Thula's teeming wildlife has made it a hunting magnet, attracting wealthy clients seeking trophy antelope. In the 1940s, the owner was a retired Governor-General of Kenya, who used it as an upmarket shooting lodge for the gin and tonic set. That's all in the past. Hunting was scrapped the moment we took over. The characterful but dilapidated old biltong and brandy camp was demolished, and in its place we built a small luxury eco-lodge set on expansive lawns leading down to the Unsaleni River. The beautiful old Dutch gabled farmhouse overlooking the reserve became home and offices for Françoise and me. But to get there has been a personal odyssey. I grew up in old Africa, before the days of mass urbanization, running barefoot under big skies in Zimbabwe, Zambia, and Malawi. My friends were rural African kids, and together we ranged the wild world that was our backyard. During the early 1960s, my family moved to the sugarcane-growing coastal belt of Zululand, South Africa. The hub of the area at the time was a hamlet out in the boondocks called Empangeni. It was a tough town with character. Stories of leathery farmers partying all night and skidding their tractors through the main street swigging spook and diesel, cane spirit mixed with a smidgen of Coca-Cola, are still told to this day. For us teenagers, you had to hold your own and play a hard game of rugby to earn respect. My shooting skills, honed in the deep African bush, also stood me in good stead, and farmers sent me out on their lands to bag guinea fowl and grouse for the pot. The backwoods was my home. I could hit a can thrown into the air at 20 paces with a .22 rifle and think little of it. After finishing school, I left for the city, establishing a real estate company. But my youthful memories of wild Africa followed me. I knew one day I would return. That happened in the early 1990s. I was poring over a map of the area west of Empangeni and was struck by the profusion of unutilized tribal land, far too feral for even the hardiest cattle. These trust lands gallop right up to the borders of the famous Umfolozi Reserve, the first game sanctuary established anywhere in Africa, and where the southern white rhino was saved from extinction. The trust land, a massive tract of gloriously pristine bush, belonged to 6 different Zulu clans. An idea light-bulbed in my head. If I could persuade them to join in conserving wildlife instead of hunting or grazing, we could create one of the finest reserves imaginable. But to do this, I would have to convince each tribal leader to agree individually to lease the land to a single trust. It would be called the Royal Zulu, and benefits such as job creation would go straight back into the struggling local communities. Thula Thula, with solid infrastructure already in place, was the key to the project. It was a natural wedge, abutting the tribal lands and forming a crucial eastern gateway to the reserves. And for the first time in 50 years, it was on the market. Destiny? Well, who knows? I took a deep breath, spoke nicely, very nicely, to my bank manager, and Françoise and I ended up as the new owners. I fell in love with it from the moment I went walkabout. It's something I still do, jump in the Land Rover and drive out onto the open savannas or into the thickest, most thorn-scrubbed veldt I can find and go for a walk. There is nothing more energizing than inhaling the tang of wilderness, loamy after rain, pungent with the richness of earth shuddering with life, or taking in the brisk, dry cleanness of winter. In the outback, life is lived for the instant. The land thrums with exuberance when everything is green and lush, and is stoically resilient when it isn't. In the bush, simple acts give intense atavistic pleasures, such as sliding a sprig of grass into the tiny slot of a scorpion hole and feeling a tug that, pound for pound, would rival a game fish. Even today that triggers memories of my born-free adolescence, as vividly as a love-lorn youth recalling his first heart-thudding kiss. So, too, does the chime of songbirds, the tunesmiths of the planet, where even a panicked warning call is perfectly in pitch. Or watching life's endlessly fascinating passing show, the brutal poetry of the food chain where life is so precarious, yet pulses so powerfully in every shape, colour and form. Those solitary hikes in Thula Thula evoked the path I first walked as a child in untamed places. Now, decades later, I was bringing a herd of elephants, to me the definitive symbol of wild Africa, back to an ancient Zululand home. Thula Thula's landscape is an elephant's paradise, woodlands leading to sweet savanna, riverbanks choked with nutritious grasses and waterholes that never run dry, even in the bleakest of winters. But we had to get cracking, electrifying the fences and building a sturdy boma. The word boma means stockade, and with antelope it's a simple matter of erecting barriers high enough to stop them from leaping over. However, with elephants, which are stronger than a truck, it's a different ballgame altogether. You have to spike the fences with enough megavolts to hold a 5-ton juggernaut. The electrical force is designed not to injure the animals, it's only there to warn them off. Thus it's vital that the boma is a replica of the reserve's outer border, so once they have learned that bumping into it is not much fun, they will later steer clear of the boundary. There was no way we were going to be able to do all that in just 2 weeks, but we would certainly give it a damn good try, and wing it from there. I radioed David and Undonga to come to the office. "Guys, you're looking at the owner of a herd of elephants." Both stared for a moment as if I'd gone loopy. David spoke first. "What do you mean?" "I've been given 9 elephants." I scratched my head, still hardly believing it myself. "It's a one-off deal. If I don't take them, they'll be shot. But the bad news is that they're a bit of a problem. They've broken through fences before. Electric ones." David's face lifted in a massive grin. "Elephants! Fantastic!" He paused for a moment, and I could see he was mulling over the same concerns that I had. "But how are we going to hold them here? Thula's fences won't stop Ellie's." "Well, we've got 2 weeks to fix them, and to build a boma." 2 weeks? For 20 miles of fence?" Ndonga spoke for the first time, giving me a doubtful look. "We've got no choice. The current owners have given me a deadline." David's unfettered enthusiasm was gratifying, and I instinctively knew he would be my right-hand man on this project. Tall and well-built, with handsome Mediterranean features, David was a natural leader with a sense of purpose about him that belied his 19 years. Our families have ties stretching back decades, and it was, I believe, fate that brought him to Thula Thula during this pivotal period. A 4th-generation Zululander, he had no formal game ranger credentials, but that didn't worry me. He could do a hard day's work and was in tune with the natural world, which I have found to be one of the best recommendations for anyone, regardless of vocation. He also had been a top rugby player, a flank forward with a reputation for almost kamikaze tackles. This tenacity would certainly be tested at Thula Thula. I then called in the Zulu staff and asked them to put the word out among the local community that we needed labourers. The nearest village to us is Buchanan, where unemployment runs at 60%. I knew there would be no problem finding able bodies. The problem would be the skill factor. A rural Zulu can build a decent shelter out of sticks, a puddle of mud and a handful of grass, but we were talking of constructing an electrified, elephant-proof stockade. The gangs would have to be heavily supervised at all.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?